All right, so have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered what's going on with those changes in your skin pigmentation?
It's something that a lot of people experience, and it can be pretty perplexing.
Yeah, and today we're really going to deep dive into the world of hyperpigmentation. Specifically, we're going to try to uncover those fascinating and sometimes kind of frustrating connections between our hormones and those pigment changes.
We're going to unpack a research paper that you sent over on the role of hormone balance in all of this.
Exactly. Because, let's be real, it's not always just about what we're putting on our skin, right? It's about what's happening on the inside too.
It's like our skin is this incredible mirror reflecting what's going on within our bodies, especially when it comes to our hormones.
That's such a good point. It's like a two-way street. And, even though we usually kind of breeze past the basics on this show, I think to really unravel this mystery, we should probably touch on melanin for a sec.
Absolutely. Understanding melanin is key here. Think of it like your skin's own personal bodyguard against the sun.
Okay, I like that analogy.
It's produced by these cells called melanocytes, and it comes in a couple of different flavors, so to speak. We've got eumelanin, which is responsible for those beautiful brown and black shades.
Right, like when you get a tan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have pheomelanin, which gives us those yellow and red undertones.
So we all have our own unique cocktail of melanin going on. That's kind of cool when you think about it. But so when we're out in the sun and we get a tan, it's basically our melanocytes being like, whoa, too much UV, time to pump up the melanin.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like they're building a little shield to protect us. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, those melanocytes, they're not just taking orders from the sun, they're also incredibly sensitive to, you guessed it, our hormones.
Uh-huh. So that's where the whole hormone hyperpigmentation connection comes into play.
You got it. It's like this intricate dance between hormones and melanin production, and sometimes things get a little, shall we say, out of rhythm.
A little offbeat.
Exactly. And that's when we might start to see those uneven patches or dark spots that we know as hyperpigmentation.
Okay, that makes sense. And we're not just talking about those temporary changes during pregnancy either.
Not at all. This can happen to anyone, anytime, thanks to the ever-changing world of hormones, which is why understanding the role of specific hormones is key. Take estrogen, for instance.
Oh yeah, estrogen, that's a big one, especially during pregnancy. In fact, isn't there actually a name for that hyperpigmentation that some women experience during pregnancy? Those darker patches that can show up in the face.
You're thinking of melasma, sometimes called the mask of pregnancy?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how estrogen can really ramp up melanin production, leading to those noticeable pigment changes.
It's like our skin is putting on a little maternity mask. But out of curiosity, why the face though? I
Yeah.
mean, what makes it such a prime target for these hormonal pigment shifts?
Well, think about it this way. The skin on our face, it's thinner, it's more delicate, and it's constantly exposed to the elements. So it's naturally more vulnerable to those hormonal ups and downs.
That makes sense.
Plus, the face just happens to have a higher concentration of those melanocytes, those melanin-producing factories we were talking about earlier. So even the slightest hormonal fluctuation can lead to more dramatic pigment changes in that area.
Wow, so estrogen is really pulling the strings there. And it's not just during pregnancy either. What about when estrogen levels naturally decline during menopause?
That's another time when those uneven patches or age spots might make an appearance. It all boils down to balance, you see. When our hormones are in harmony, our skin tends to reflect that.
So maintaining that hormonal balance, that's one of the keys to keeping our skin happy and even toned. Makes you realize how powerful those little chemical messengers really are.
Absolutely. But estrogen is just one character in this complex play. There are other hormones, like those produced by the thyroid, that have a surprisingly big impact on our skin's appearance.
The thyroid. Okay, I have to admit, I haven't really made that connection before. I always think of the thyroid as being more about metabolism and energy levels and all that.
And you're right, it is. But here's the thing. Skin health and metabolism are way more intertwined than you might think. The thyroid produces these hormones that essentially control our metabolism. And that includes the rate at which our skin cells renew themselves and even how much oil our skin produces.
Interesting. So if someone has an underactive thyroid, for example, could that actually show up on their skin in noticeable ways?
Absolutely. With hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid, you often see drier skin. And that dryness can make any existing discoloration more noticeable. It's like having a less forgiving canvas, so to speak.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, we have an overactive thyroid,
Right, hyperthyroidism. And that can actually lead to more rapid skin changes. It can even influence things like hair pigmentation.
Wow, that's wild. It's like our thyroid is secretly conducting this whole symphony of skin changes behind the scenes, and we had no idea. This is all starting to make so much sense now.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And believe it or not, we haven't even touched on the impact of stress on our
Oh,
skin.
stress. Don't even get me started. We've all been there. A big deadline at work, family drama, and suddenly, bam, our skin decides to stage a full-blown revolt.
I know exactly what you mean. And there's a very real hormonal reason for that. Cortisol, which is often called the stress hormone, plays a major role in this whole skin saga.
Cortisol, it's always up to something. But how does it actually impact our skin's pigmentation? Like, what's the connection there?
Well, when we're constantly stressed out, our bodies go into overdrive, right? And they start pumping out cortisol like it's going out of style. But what's fascinating is that cortisol can actually hijack the melanin production process.
What? Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it can actually lead to those dark spots we're trying to avoid. So it's like this double whammy. Not only are we dealing with the emotional roller coaster of stress, but our skin is literally wearing the evidence for the world to see.
So managing stress, it's not just about feeling calmer. It's about protecting our skin too.
Precisely. It's all connected.
It's like our bodies have this incredible way of communicating with us,
Yes,
right?
they do. It's amazing. And our skin, it's like one of those giant billboards sending out messages.
It's true. And I feel like we often just ignore those messages or just try to cover them up with makeup.
I know, it's like trying to silence the messenger. But those messages, those changes in our pigmentation, they can be valuable clues.
Absolutely. They can tell us so much about what's happening hormonally, right? Like those dark patches we were talking about earlier, melasma. You mentioned that often pops up on the face.
Exactly. Melasma, especially when it's not related to pregnancy, can often signal that estrogen levels might be a bit elevated.
So if you're noticing those patches and you're not pregnant or taking any medications that could be causing it, maybe it's worth getting those hormone levels checked out.
It's definitely a conversation to have with your doctor. They can help you connect the dots and see if there's something hormonal going on.
Makes sense. And what about those other changes we might see? I remember you mentioning acanthosis nigricans before the break. That one sounded a bit intense.
Yeah, acanthosis nigricans can cause thickening and darkening of the skin, and it often shows up in areas like the neck, armpits, or groin.
Okay, and that one usually signals an issue with insulin, right?
It can be a sign of insulin resistance, yes, and potentially higher levels of androgens.
Which are often associated with conditions like PCOS, right?
Exactly. Though not always. It's a good idea to investigate further if you're seeing those changes.
Got it. So talk to your doctor, maybe get those hormone levels checked out. And what about stress? We were on the topic of cortisol before the break. Are there any telltale signs on our skin that our cortisol levels might be doing a little dance in the wrong direction?
Absolutely. Persistent acne, especially when it's coupled with dark spots, can be a red flag.
It's like our skin is saying, hey, chill out.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like I can actually understand what my skin is trying to tell me. It's a whole new language.
I love that. It's about tuning into those subtle messages.
So we've covered estrogen, thyroid hormones, cortisol, but we can't forget about testosterone, can we?
We can't. Even though it's often thought of as a male hormone, women produce testosterone too, just in smaller amounts.
Right, and we need a little bit of it to keep things running smoothly, right?
Exactly.
But how does it affect pigmentation? I'm really curious about that connection.
Well, like estrogen, testosterone can influence how much melanin our bodies produce.
Really?
Yeah, when testosterone levels are elevated, which can happen in conditions like PCOS, it can actually lead to increased pigmentation.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about estrogen being the main culprit. What about those other androgens we hear about, like DHEA? Do they play a role in this too?
DHEA is an interesting one. It's actually a precursor to both testosterone and estrogen.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it can indirectly impact pigmentation by influencing those hormonal pathways.
So it's like this whole chain reaction happening.
Yeah.
But DHEA also has its own unique effects on the skin, right?
It does. It has some really interesting properties. For one, it seems to have this balancing effect when it comes to cortisol. Remember how we were talking about how cortisol can potentially lead to increased pigmentation?
Yeah.
Well, DHEA can actually help to counteract those effects.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
So it's like a hormonal tug of war happening within our bodies with these different hormones all vying for control over our skin's appearance.
that's a great way to put it.
Depending on which hormone is winning at any given moment, you might see different pigmentation patterns emerge. This is all so fascinating.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered estrogen, thyroid hormones, cortisol, testosterone, DHEA. Have we missed any other key players in this hyperpigmentation puzzle?
We've covered the ones that directly influence pigmentation, but there's one more hormone worth mentioning.
Okay, what is it?
Insulin.
Insulin. Now, that one I haven't really considered before. I always think of insulin in relation to blood sugar control. What's the link to our skin's pigmentation?
It's an indirect link, but an important one. Insulin resistance, which is something we see in conditions like PCOS, can actually set off this whole cascade of hormonal imbalances. And these imbalances can then impact everything from our androgen levels to our estrogen levels, which ultimately can affect pigmentation.
So even though insulin isn't directly telling those melanocytes, hey, produce more melanin, it's still pulling strings behind the scenes by influencing the overall hormonal environment in our bodies.
Exactly. It really highlights just how interconnected our systems are. One thing can impact another, which impacts another, and so on.
This is incredible. I'm starting to understand just how complex this whole hormone hyperpigmentation connection really is.
It's pretty amazing.
But knowing all of this, what can we actually do about it? Where do we even begin to manage these hormone-related pigmentation issues?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the good news is there are a number of different paths you can explore.
Okay, good.
We can look at more conventional treatments, and we can also explore some incredible natural approaches. The key is to really find what works best for your individual needs and preferences.
Let's unpack those options. First up, let's talk about the conventional route. What kind of treatments are we talking about here? What do dermatologists typically recommend?
So when it comes to conventional treatments, topical medications are often the first line of defense.
Okay, and by topical medications, you mean creams or lotions that you apply directly to the areas of concern.
Exactly.
Okay, and these creams, are they basically working to either slow down melanin production or maybe help speed up skin cell turnover to kind of fade those dark spots?
Exactly. They're targeting those processes directly.
Okay,
One common ingredient you'll find in these topical treatments is hydroquinone. It's been used for years to lighten dark spots, and it can be very effective. However, it's crucial to use hydroquinone under the guidance of a dermatologist.
okay, got it. So this isn't something you just want to grab off the shelf at the drugstore and start applying liberally.
Not necessarily. Your dermatologist might recommend a specific concentration or advise you on how to use it safely.
Right.
Another option is retinoids, which are derived from vitamin A.
Okay.
They work by speeding up skin cell turnover.
So they're basically like the fast forward button for skin cell renewal.
Exactly.
Interesting. And what about oral medications? Are those ever used for hyperpigmentation?
They can be, but they're typically reserved for more severe cases or when those topical treatments haven't produced the results that someone is looking for.
Right.
Some oral medications work by actually blocking the production of melanin, while others work to target those underlying hormonal imbalances that might be contributing to the hyperpigmentation. So, for instance, if your hyperpigmentation is linked to PCOS, your doctor might prescribe medication to help regulate your hormones.
It makes sense that the approach would really depend on what's at the root of the hyperpigmentation in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. Working with a healthcare professional is key here. They can help you figure out what's going on and recommend the most appropriate treatment plan for your unique situation. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about those natural approaches.
Yes.
These might be a good fit for people who are looking for a more gentle approach or who are just interested in a more holistic way to manage their skin health.
I'm all for exploring natural options. What kind of remedies are we talking about here? Are there natural ingredients that can actually make a difference when it comes to hyperpigmentation?
There are some really incredible natural ingredients that have shown real promise in brightening the skin and fading those dark spots.
Okay, good. Like what?
Some of the most well-known ones are vitamin C, licorice root extract, kojic acid, and niacinamide.
Okay, those are all ingredients that I've definitely seen popping up in skincare products. But how do they actually work? How do they combat hyperpigmentation?
They each have their own unique mechanisms, but basically they're targeting different steps in that melanin production process that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, for example, vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant,
Right.
and it helps neutralize those pesky free radicals that can contribute to hyperpigmentation.
Free radicals, those are like the little troublemakers that are always causing a ruckus in our bodies, right?
Exactly. And then we have licorice root extract.
Okay.
That one's really interesting because it can actually inhibit tyrosinase. If you remember, tyrosinase is an enzyme that's a key player in melanin synthesis. So
Nice.
licorice root extract can help to reduce melanin production.
It's like putting a roadblock in the way of those dark spots, preventing them from forming in the first place. So it's like a multi-pronged approach, using these different natural ingredients to interrupt the process at various stages.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And it's important to remember that with natural remedies, consistency is key. It often takes time to see those visible results.
So it's about being patient.
It is. Think of it as a long-term commitment to your skin health, not a quick fix.
Makes sense. It's about gradually restoring balance. But it's not just about what we apply topically, right? I mean, those lifestyle factors that we were talking about earlier, like stress management, diet, sleep, those all play a part too, don't they?
Absolutely. They play a huge role. Managing stress is crucial. We talked about how that stress hormone, cortisol, can actually trigger hyperpigmentation.
Yeah.
Finding healthy ways to manage stress, whether it's meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, whatever works for you, those can make a real difference not just for your mental health, but for your skin health too.
It's amazing how connected it all is, isn't
Yeah.
it? It is. And we can't forget about diet and sleep.
Absolutely not. Nourishing your body with a balanced diet, making sure you're getting enough sleep, those are essential for hormonal harmony, which ultimately is going to show up in our skin.
So it's really about taking a holistic approach, whether we're opting for those conventional treatments or exploring the natural remedies. It's about looking at the whole picture, those internal imbalances, and supporting our skin externally as well.
Precisely. And it's about forming a partnership with a knowledgeable healthcare professional. They can help you put all the pieces together and create a plan that truly addresses your individual needs.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the intricate dance between our hormones and those frustrating pigmentation changes.
Yeah,
It's not just about vanity. It's about so much more than that.
it really is.
It's about our health.
Absolutely.
It's about listening to our bodies and understanding what our skin might be trying to tell us.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's amazing how much we can learn just by paying attention to our skin.
Yeah, it's true. Our skin is often trying to tell us something, especially when it comes to our hormones.
It's like it has its own language.
Yeah,
And the more we can understand that language, the better we can respond to its needs.
exactly. It's about becoming fluent in the language of our bodies.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So, speaking of responding, we've talked about all these different hormonal players and how they can influence hyperpigmentation. But what about solutions? What can we actually do about it?
That's where things get really empowering. There are actually a number of different strategies, both conventional and natural, that can help us manage and even prevent these pigment changes.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit. We touched on conventional treatments earlier. Can you remind us, what are some of those go-to options that a dermatologist might recommend?
Sure. So topical medications are often the first line of defense when it comes to hyperpigmentation. We're talking about things like creams and lotions that you apply directly to the areas of concern.
So these creams are basically working to interrupt that melanin production process that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. One of the most well-known ingredients in these topical treatments is hydroquinone. It's been a staple in dermatology for lightening dark spots, and it can be very effective, but it is important to use it under the guidance of a professional.
Right, this isn't something you just want to pick up at the drugstore and start experimenting with on your own.
Exactly. Your dermatologist can recommend the right concentration for your skin type and make sure you're using it safely.
Okay, and what about those retinoids we hear so much about? How do those fit into the picture?
Retinoids are fantastic for addressing hyperpigmentation because they work by increasing cell turnover, which means they help to shed those pigmented skin cells more quickly.
So they're basically hitting the fast forward button on skin cell renewal.
Exactly. It's like giving your skin a gentle nudge to reveal those fresh new cells underneath.
I like it. And are there ever times when those oral medications might be necessary?
Absolutely. If topical treatments aren't quite cutting it, or if someone has a more severe case of hyperpigmentation, then oral medications might be an option. Some of those work by blocking melanin production, while others address the underlying hormonal imbalances that might be contributing to the problem.
So it's really about finding the right approach for each individual and the root cause of their hyperpigmentation. It's not one size fits all.
You got it. That's why it's so crucial to work with a knowledgeable healthcare provider who can help determine the best course of action for your specific situation.
Makes total sense. Now, for those who are interested in exploring more of those natural avenues, what are some of the more promising options in that realm?
Oh, there are so many. The world of natural remedies for hyperpigmentation is vast and fascinating. There are a lot of great ingredients out there that have shown real potential in clinical studies. Vitamin C is a powerhouse. It's a potent antioxidant that can really help to protect our skin from those damaging free radicals that we talked about earlier, which we know can worsen hyperpigmentation.
Right, it's like vitamin C is a superhero for our skin, fighting off those free radical villains.
Exactly. And then there's licorice root extract.
Ooh, yes, I've heard good things about that one. How does that work? It's magic.
Licorice root extract is known for its ability to inhibit the activity of tyrosinase. And if you remember, tyrosinase is an enzyme that plays a crucial role in the production of melanin.
Ah, yes. So it's like putting a damper on that whole melanin production process.
Exactly. And because it's natural, it can be a gentler approach for those with more sensitive skin.
I love it. It's like we're building a team of natural superheroes
Yeah.
to combat those dark spots.
I like the way you think.
But it's not all about what we apply topically,
Yeah.
right? What about those lifestyle changes we were talking about that can make a big difference?
Those are crucial. Managing stress is huge. We know that cortisol, that stress hormone, can actually trigger hyperpigmentation. So,
Hmm.
finding healthy ways to de stress, whether it's meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, whatever works for you, it can make a huge difference, not just for your mental health, but for your skin as well.
Right. It's amazing how interconnected it all is.
Absolutely.
And of course, we can't forget about diet and sleep.
Absolutely not. Nourishing your body with a balanced diet, making sure you're getting enough sleep, those are non negotiables when it comes to hormonal harmony, which, as we've been talking about, is so closely tied to our skin health.
So important. Well, this has been an absolutely eye-opening journey into this whole world of hormones and hyperpigmentation. As we wrap up, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how our hormones impact our skin and the different factors that contribute to hyperpigmentation, the better equipped we are to take control of our skin health. It's about being proactive, listening to our bodies, and seeking guidance from knowledgeable healthcare professionals.
Beautifully said. It's about tuning into those subtle signals our skin is sending us and taking a holistic approach to address the root causes of our concerns. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of hormones and hyperpigmentation. We hope you've learned a lot. And remember, your skin is worth it. We'll catch you in the next episode.